Hi, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining me. I'm Dr. Philip McMillan. I'm a physician looking at COVID-19 since 2020, focused primarily on the autoimmune questions around the spike protein. I've been bringing you up to date information for years. And for those who regularly listen, they will know that this is nonetheless something very important. This here is a Substack from Mary Demasai, and she is an investigative journalist and medical journalist for independent science. And this is her Substack. And the breaking news is the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practice, the ACIP, launches a sweeping review of COVID-19 vaccine. This is under Retsef Levi. This is causing a lot of controversy because the first point is that if they're doing a review of it, that suggests that maybe they didn't do a review in the first place. And so when we go through it, we'll be as well looking at their terms of reference. And I'll make a few points about this, what it is that they're trying to achieve, and some points about not to say that I told you so, but I told you so. These are important principles and an important time for us to reflect on the science. So before we start, just a reminder, if you want to see the Substack article, the link is in the description. And critically, coming up in the next week is the hidden time bomb about rapid arterial aging. You need to understand the science around this because if you understand it, there may be techniques that we can use to reduce the risk. So again, look in the description below to get the link. So let's get back to this very important piece of information. This is talking about a review. Now, you can understand this is causing a lot of controversy because, for one, Professor Retsef Levi is not a medic. He is an MIT professor, really looking at healthcare issues. And put it this way, he's not a medical person, and this is causing a lot of controversy because they're saying that he should not be in this kind of position to review it. But the reality is that you need somebody who is independent. And what I've explained to people is that you need people who are asking questions. Because if you put people who weren't asking questions, they don't want to look silly. And so therefore they will probably not necessarily investigate it as well as they should. For people who have been asking questions, it is extremely important to get to the truth. And so, therefore, they are more likely to find out exactly what was going on. And so, when we look at this presentation here, this Substack, you have to look at some of the responses from the interview that Miriam did with him. And so, he was elected the chair of this working group. And can you reveal who else will be on it? And he says two of his colleagues are included, Dr. Robert Malone and Dr. James Pagano. Robert Malone, you can imagine the upset again in the scientific community because he was put as an outsider because he was the first to conceptualize the idea of mRNA, and then he went against it when it came out, and therefore he's like the worst person to talk about it. So they have been trying to destroy his reputation for years. The reality is that he's an extremely intelligent man, very understanding of the industry, and so therefore there is probably a degree of fear that he is in this issue. And so when we look at this review, one of the questions that was asked here by Dr. Demasi is that hearing all this feels surreal. Billions of doses have been administered, and we were assured the testing was rigorous. Now you are saying there are huge unknowns about dosage, how long it lingers in the body, even its safety. Were we lied to by public health authorities? His response: I want to be forward facing. I think that the new ACIP was appointed with a goal of asking more questions and bringing all the available information and knowledge needed to understand the efficacy and safety of these COVID vaccines. Very important point. He goes on, I believe that only transparent and comprehensive pursuit of the answers will allow us to rebuild trust. And this is something I keep on saying, is that for all the people who are annoyed about the questions, and I do get a lot of people who are very annoyed that I keep asking these questions and I bring up vaccines and the potential link of vaccines to some of the patterns of illness that we're seeing. And it is very upsetting for some people who are locked in the narrative. I'm just objective. And I know, or let me just rephrase this, based on my research around the spike protein and autoimmune responses, based on the extrapolation that was said from 2020, I anticipate that if you can get autoimmune responses with the spike protein, the actions in the pandemic are likely to cause us very serious health issues to the population. And so this is just the science. I can't say it any other way. So therefore, it means if I understand that, I will be looking for autoimmune type responses as some of the negative outcomes from the pandemic. That's inconvenient to some people because people keep on saying, I have to prove that that's so. No, I don't. The regulators should have checked it. If I ask the question, if it's reasonable and scientific, you need to therefore do the research. So I'm looking through some of the points here, as I said, in terms of the presentation. They were talking about here someone still making spike after 700 days of being vaccinated and contamination with plasmid DNA. So they are tackling a lot of the issues that are going on. There is so much zealotry surrounding vaccines. I don't know why it is so hard to imagine that they may cause long-term harms. This is really, really a very simple and important question. People somehow imagine, and this is what he answered, for some reason, there's a misconception that the harms of vaccines primarily show up shortly after vaccination, and long term harms are assumed to be unlikely and essentially ignored. That is, how do I say that? That is not logical because if the vaccine is having long term immune protection, why would you not also consider longer term potential of harm? We've seen it with the swine flu vaccine in 2009, where it caused narcolepsy in some children. That presented months to a year after. So if you didn't know to look for it, you would never have seen it. So I think that that short time frame is probably convenient for those who are in the industry and don't want the questions to be asked. So quickly, as I said, I'm going to show you here this terms of reference, and I've highlighted a few points. So again, this is again the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. It was updated on the 20th of August, 2025. So this is just a day old. And they are looking at the COVID-19 Immunization Workgroup. And so therefore the administrative requirements associated with setting this up under the CDC. And so they are looking at putting this together and they're asking very, very specific questions and looking at critical aspects around what it is that should be done. They have to advise population groups and here it shows advise on population groups and or circumstances in which a vaccine or related agent is recommended. I think that's a very, very simple but important point. I have always maintained, some people think because I ask questions, I'm anti-vaccine, anti-COVID vaccine. No, I was against the broad use of vaccines across a population because I understood the risks. I understood that based on the science, there were certain characteristics about high-risk people, older, comorbidities, obesity, higher in men than women. You know who they are. Therefore, if they had not been exposed, the other bit that I say is that if someone had already had infection, no, because if you understand spike protein autoimmunity, you would realize that the primary driver of a cytokine storm, if they had moderate to severe COVID, is linked to the autoimmune cytokine response. Why would you therefore go and stimulate it again? And so it's very, very specific about targeting critical aspects of the disease. Here again, topics under discussion by the work group. They're looking at the risk benefit and cost benefit analysis. They're looking to identify critical gaps in the existing scientific and clinical knowledge and methodologies related to the safety and efficacy of the COVID-19 immunizations. This is an important one. And, it's one of those times where I'll have to say that the research that we are doing, we have a small team, we've been working for almost 5 years now. I think we have gotten almost every answer that's needed to be done in terms of understanding severe COVID, long COVID, and what I call the COVID storm, putting that together. And so, therefore, they need to hear this information. So, we probably need to finish up those papers very, very quickly. What I wanted to highlight as well is just some of the points that they're talking about here and share with you that when you understand the science and you are ahead of the science, a lot of what you say can sound like misinformation. And this is why a lot of my content has been suppressed. If you are watching it now, you are one of the 5% that will see it. The other 95 will never see this information because it was that suppressed on some platforms. And so here is one of the things that we've been talking about for the longest time. IgG4 class switching. How many times have we spoken about that? Immune imprinting. Myself and Gert has spoken about that a long time. Certainly the viral evolution on the leaky immunizations. Gert predicted that since 2021. Can you believe they didn't actually really go and study this? Then they're going to examine the impact of COVID-19 immunization on COVID-19 and all-cause deaths, hospitalizations, and disability. I mean, this is just basic stuff that was not done. How in the world can anybody talk about safety if you are not trying to correlate all-cause mortality, hospitalizations, illness, looking at vaccinated versus unvaccinated? I mean, this is just basic science. So there are so many things that they have to address. And as I said, if you want to see the whole article, it is in the description below and you can read through it, hear the questions and answers. You will then see the link to the terms of reference that I've shown you there, and you will get a better understanding of the challenges ahead. Here's my final point. When I look at that overview and I look through all the points that they were looking at, there are two things that I don't think they have on that list, that if they miss this, well, three things, it will mean that they themselves, even though they're trying to get ahead of the science, they will still have failed to address the important point. So if Professor Levi is listening, here is the point. One, you cannot make progress on this without doing autopsies. And we want the autopsies on people who had been vaccinated with COVID. We want as many autopsies as can be done. The use of AI to try and help, because we don't have enough pathologists, is a perfect example of how we can get to answers quickly. That's one. Two, embalmers clots. I've been talking about this for 2 years, and if that is not looked at and tried to make sense of in relation to what happened with the pandemic, whether it's from infection or vaccination, that's a huge failure. It is one of the most strange scientific facts about the pandemic that cannot be explained. And it's worse that it can't be explained, that nobody knows why it's happening. So that's another thing that they must look at. And the third thing is one of the things I have to raise more awareness of, and that is the interaction between the spike protein and bacteria in the intestines and the sinuses, where it seems to induce them to produce unusual toxin-like products that cause illness. If they don't include those three things in their analysis and in their research, they will find that they are still too far behind to impact on population health. This is big stuff, and I do appreciate that they are trying, but there's still a lot more work to be done. So look in the description. You will also get there COVID's hidden time bomb, rapid arterial aging. Remember, a lot of this information is sometimes 2 years ahead of when you'll hear it. So join us if you want to learn more about what is going on, and we will continue to share as much information and updates as we can. Have a great evening.